Welcome to the Hobby Chop Podcast. Thanks for being here. This is a podcast for the people. No sponsorships. We do this for the love of the hobby. And if you like what you hear, please subscribe below. If you're on YouTube, show your appreciation. Hit the like button, drop a comment. If you're listening on a streaming service, 5 stars. We appreciate everything you can do for us. We appreciate you guys being here, listening to us. This is our 3rd episode. You've got me, Big Ken, and welcome in Zip and Tyler. Fellas, how are you doing?
Good. When you just said no sponsorship, I immediately thought of Step Brothers of investors, possibly you. Yeah, no. How's it going?
Doing well, Ken. How are you today? And I will say 4th episode. Don't sell us short. This is episode 4.
4. Big hitter. Clean up. Hitting clean up today. Yeah, 4th.
I didn't update this from last week.
Oh, no.
Oh, it's our 4th episode. And you know what? Our streams are showing. People are liking, right? We're building, we're gaining some traction here, building some steam, and I'm excited because I really look forward to doing this with you guys every week.
Oh yeah, I love it for what it's worth. Like, it is something I also get to look forward to because I don't get to go to shows as much as you guys. So this is a big part of my hobby experience and like participation, right? Like this is a huge part of it. This is who I talk to because my son's 1, so I don't get the greatest hobby banter with him. It's usually just get me my damn bottle now or else. Yeah, so this is great. I love this. Yeah, absolutely.
And we fixed Tyler's microphone. We worked on this all weekend long to get this thing fixed.
Was there something wrong with it last episode? I don't think anyone noticed.
Yeah. It's fixed. So there'll be no more complaints about that, I hope.
Alrighty.
So look, let's jump into today's episode. One thing that has been going on, this whatnot thing, that's been going on for a little over a week now. Like I didn't want to address it when I did my solo one. And I know a few people had reached out and said, geez, I'm surprised you hadn't said anything. I really don't think anybody needs to hear from me what I think. I don't think I think we had, 2,000 people come on and say how disgusting that was. I don't think we need a 2001, another video of me coming out and saying how, because, we all know how disgusting it was. I mean, my thought was that, the only thought I had on this is they should have done something immediately, right? Or had something in place that when this happened, there's rules and regulations that, this is the immediate punishment. This is the fallout. This is what's going to happen. And I think the reason people were so upset is because nothing happened for so long. I know things have happened now. They've shut down his stream. And people are, up in arms that it's only temporary. But I hope, moving forward, they figure this out. They understand things like this could happen, and we need to put something in place that are going to affect people. I mean, that's why we have rules, right? If something happens, these are the consequences. And that's just my thought on it. Any thoughts, fellas?
Yeah, the only thing I would add, right, is just it's a black eye. So, and really the lesson that needs to be learned from it is the response. Ken's exactly right. Yeah. There needs to be a standard response for something like this, just so that we get it out. We get it out of there. It's nonsense. Get rid of it. We don't need to spend weeks talking about it because it's terrible.
Yeah.
And let's go focus on something that's actually positive, especially in this hobby, which, at its core, remember, it is a hobby. We should be talking about positive things and, and that's all I would say about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the one other aspect, because obviously, I'm in agreement with what you guys say about the whole situation. Like, no qualms here. The other thing that I didn't like, and I think, Ken, you've kind of created the platform of the podcast and things like that, and something that you didn't do that I saw a lot of people do that was obviously not as repulsive, but still was like people are propping this up to like market themselves, and like that's gross too. So like I think just coming on here saying it right before we get into some really great topics and listener questions, just get it out of the way is the perfect way to do it. You know what I mean? So
Yep.
that's all we got to say, I think.
Excellent job, fellas. So look, we have the Super Bowl coming up this weekend. So one of the things before we jump into listener questions, which were amazing last week, and I think they're even better this week. So I'm really looking forward to those. But we have the Super Bowl, big game coming up this weekend. We're going to do just a little bit. We want to talk a little bit about card prices of the players there, what it could mean for Mahomes or Hurts if they win, if they lose, are their cards going to go up or their cards going to go down? And we've put together some ideas of what we think is going to happen. And before we end, we're going to give our predictions. And Jordan has pushed for a wager.
A very small wager, but a very important wager to this group. Yes.
Go ahead. You could tell them what the wager is before we get started.
Not only are we going to do a pick the winner, that'd be too easy. Whoever is the closest to the score of the game will then win a free round of golf. We all three of us golf. Two of us below average. One of us, you may say, scratch, maybe even a plus handicap. So we're all going to golf. But the thing about this is the golf skill doesn't matter. What matters is that we guess the score. So whoever has the right score gets a free round of golf. And
so we're going to golf. Either way, we're going golfing. It just depends who's going to pay for it.
That's right. Thank you.
All right. I'm glad we put that out there. All right. So Super Bowl coming up. Mahomes, Hurts, Saquon Barkley, right? Travis Kelce. What do we think? Win, lose. What do we think of their cards? What do we think of the prices? What do we think the market is going to do?
Okay, I think we should leave Mahomes last because I think it's a different stratosphere of a whole conversation. So why don't we start with the position guys rather than the quarterbacks? Because I guess rather than Hurts, just because I think those two are very different in their own right. So like Saquon has this unbelievable year. Well, I think it was the 7th most rushing yards ever in a season, or was that that might have even just been in the playoffs so far. So if you get a guy like this that a running back is just carrying to a Super Bowl with a very passionate fan base, I think those numbers can run pretty wild and pretty special. And also I feel like it almost puts him into this like legendary type category for the season and what he's done in the backwards hurdle. You have all these like storyline moments for Saquon. You know what I mean? What do you guys think about that as I just kind of lead it with that?
Yeah, I think the Saquon market, it will be interesting from, obviously from a card perspective, because if you really think about it, right, quarterbacks drive the entire hobby market. We get the occasional wide receiver who has some quote unquote hobby love. Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and that's about where it starts and stops. And we have no running backs that are in that space. Literally, we have 0 running backs that anybody cares about and moves the market. Saquon with a big Super Bowl performance coming off of this year and the way he's performed in the playoffs. And then let's say, if they were happen to win the game, Saquon, I think, certainly will remain hobby relevant. And for the first time, you'll have a running back, that really transcends just, into the space where we care, right? Because if you even think back, McCaffrey was the only running back that might have had a little bit of a hobby love, and I wouldn't even call it that, right? There was people would like to buy his cards, but there's not a lot of people out there, clamoring for a CMC card. But I think Saquon could change that with a big performance, or definitely with a win. and really that's about it from the non QB
So
folks in my
let me
world.
I just want to jump in and ask this question before you get away from him. If he was to win the MVP, would that change? Do you think that all of a sudden his cards would jump? Not just so much win a Super Bowl, but if he was the MVP, would he get a big jump in his cards?
I think it's certainly possible, right? Because if you and I'll go ahead and share my screen here, Ken, because we're going to do this on a couple of players. Because I think this will help make that point. Um, and so what I'm looking at here is I've got a couple different players pulled up,
There you go.
and we're going to look at kind of how those players' card performances are going. Is it sharing the Saquon?
It's a Mahomes index right now. Yeah.
Sorry about that. Let me re-present it.
See, we're saving the best for last.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, like I do think if Saquon did get the Super Bowl MVP, it would only help even more. I mean, like it would definitely be more. It would mean more for his cards than just the Super Bowl win, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I don't know to the extent, but I think that really would matter.
Mm-hmm.
I do.
Yeah. So I mean, kind of what the chart that I pulled up is something that you can do if you have card ladder or card ladder subscription, and it's just the player index data. And I've got a really wide chart here that looks at Saquon's market from a full 1 year perspective. This time last year through today, and you can certainly see right the astronomical rise.
Yep.
So I think that to answer your question, I think there will be a new floor set. And I think as we talk about all the players where the Super Bowl has potential to impact their card market, it's about what is that new floor. I think that's the overarching theme of what the impact is, not what it will spike to, not the peak, but what becomes that new floor. And I think Saquon is going to, at least for the entire summer and probably moving into next year, have a new floor. Now, a lot will depend on long term. What does he do next year, and how does it follow up? But
Yep.
if you just look at the chart and look at a year, and then if you can kind of hyper scale it here,
Yeah.
small
if you
rise.
you look at that right there. I was lucky enough to buy one of his rookie auto PSA 10 in December, right there, right before you saw that, where it just started to rise sharply. And was able to move that first day of Atlanta at Culture Collision. So
And
that was probably one of my better pickups and flips.
and if you're not watching and you're just listening, it looks like it's going straight to the moon, and it's never been close there for the description of this visual representation on the podcast. Yeah, it's never been higher and it's never been close.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
Tyler, to your theory with the new floor, does that floor go below the peak right now?
I mean, I think it probably does to an extent.
Okay.
That there's some hype just around being in the game, right? So, for those who aren't listening, essentially the chart we're looking at shows that in the last 6 months, Saquon cards are up 93%.
Yeah.
From a growth rate perspective, and the value change is astronomical. It's like 1,700%, and you have a recent spike. Once they made the Super Bowl, so I think it'll come back down off of that, and you already see that for those who are watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see that, right? It's already bounced back down a little bit when we talk about kind of that smaller, and you'll see it here when I come down to a month view, and you can really look at what that is. But I think this range here becomes the new floor.
Gotcha. Okay. To be clear though, with a Super Bowl MVP or just with a Super Bowl win,
No, I think this becomes the floor, right? I think this
Just where
probably
he is.
becomes the floor. I think you've got the potential of a little spike if they win the game and he's Super Bowl MVP, and then that becomes the you'll see a spike and then a small fallback, but he has a chance to up the floor once more with those kind of things. But I
See,
mean, I really think you have a floor set at least
See,
for a
this
year.
is this. I hear you. This is where I disagree a little bit because of how volatile football markets are, and where he was in the like. Also, he didn't if he got the rushing record, I think maybe like because if when we're talking floor, or that's the new floor for whatever.
No, I think for a year. I think
That's
for
what
a
I'm
year.
asking. Yeah, that's what I'm
Yeah, no,
asking. Because
I think the floor would be for a year, right? Because he's got to back it up next year,
okay,
right? But I think for the terms of probably everybody who's listening and what anybody cares about is, can I buy Saquon and still have an opportunity to make money over the next 9 months, but as we go towards national, Ken's favorite time of the year, and as we move into the beginning of the season, and the last football hype, and then the sell off.
Okay, I could get behind before next season. It maintains a new floor regardless. I can get behind that.
Yeah, I think to your question about like maintaining an all time floor or creating this absolute basement that it just never falls before. I don't think Saquon's in a place where he can build that yet. We're going to get to that in the Mahomes conversation.
Right. But and for someone of Saquon's like position, it would need to be something as significant as like that rushing record, or if it is the Super Bowl, it's with the MVP, right? Like, do you think that or?
Yeah, probably to set like an all-time like
Right.
this is a new level. You're
Yeah.
never falling below it. You've got to go out and rush for 2,000 or have 2,000 all-purpose yards again with a Super Bowl win either this year, next year, something in there with the Super Bowl MVP. You got to have some major occurrences because if you look at just CMC's market, right? Even pre-injury, it was never really super steady. I mean, it didn't have this absolute basement floor. We're never falling before, and that's a guy that had 2,000 all-purpose yard seasons year after year. Or look at somebody like Derrick Henry. You've never had a significant event where you've won, but he's rushed for 2,000 yards a couple of times. So,
so do you think this winning a Super Bowl or just making it? I mean, McCaffrey made it to the Super Bowl but didn't win, so he really didn't see. Do you think? And I'm going to kind of jump on. I think what Jordan was kind of pushing for too was with the win. If he does win, does that put him in a level above these other guys we're mentioning, McCaffrey and Derrick Henry, and or do we still just show all the love for the quarterbacks and we're just going to keep those running backs,
For Saquon specifically, I go back to if they win and he's the Super Bowl MVP, then I think it looks different.
Okay.
That's
I think with a win or a Super Bowl MVP, absolutely he can leapfrog above those guys. 'Cause I think there's a couple other quick dynamics that are in play there, right? It's the whole moving from the New York market to Philadelphia, the way the whole thing went down, the fact that the Giants were on Hard Knocks, right? And we got to see how that played out. That conversation about Daniel Jones choosing to basically give Daniel Jones money and not give Saquon money, and then him going to a division rival. So there's a lot of dynamics there that also with rabid fan bases that help prop that market up that none of those other guys we talked about, the Henrys or the CMCs, they don't have that. Like there's nobody propping that market up, but you absolutely could see that from that perspective.
Cool.
So,
all right. So who's next?
We can jump over to probably the Jalen Hurts conversation.
That's fine.
Jordan, if you want to kick us off, I'll get the chart pulled up on Hurts.
So Hurts, I mean, we think about a few years ago, he had one of the best performances in a Super Bowl ever, like statistically, right? Also, I didn't get to watch that game. I was in an airport in Barcelona. I was in Barcelona, like catching a flight. So I watched it on like a TikTok like stream. So I caught the end of it with the Chiefs winning, but I didn't get to see the whole thing. And then I saw the box score and I was like, oh my God. But he's back. Tyler, like you've said, he's just a winner. But he gets a lot of people hold a lot of things against him, I think, about like I don't know. It's weird. It's like people don't want to give him the love that maybe statistically and accomplishment wise he's done more than others. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think Hurts is interesting, right? This is his second Super Bowl appearance. The season last year, the way it just finished, I think put a bad taste in people's mouth probably a little bit. But every time the Eagles have won, it's he has a great offensive line. The defense is good, and now it's he has Saquon Barkley and stuff like that. At the end of the day, that offense works because of what Jalen Hurts brings to it, in my opinion, and I just find it odd that he doesn't get some of the credit where you see guys who haven't won that get credit. This is where I could die on the Justin Herbert hill. That drives me absolutely bonkers. But everybody loves 6'6", 245 who with a laser rocket arm, right? Back to the SNL skit.
You think it comes down to a likable thing though? Like do you think there's quarterbacks out there that are just more likable than others, and it kind of bleeds over into the card market where people are just like, I don't need to PC Hurts, or I don't need to own a bunch of his cards, but give me some Herbert, or give me some Mahomes, or give me some Burrow, right? Because they're just more likable. Do you think that bleeds over at all, or do you think that has nothing to do with it?
Likability definitely matters. Like Josh Allen has an amazing like personality and persona. He's also a great player. Let's not get that confused. But like, I think it definitely matters, and like I think Hurts is very like he's just about his business. But also too, I think like it's weird. I feel like a lot of it's like the running quarterbacks. Like people have like they can't get around it. Like imagine if Burrow had the MVPs that Lamar had. What would his market be like? Like I just think people really want that like guy who can sling it. Not to mention Lamar can throw the ball. I mean, look, I'm talking about Lamar now. We're talking about Hurts, but like I think it's something about people not being able to get over that like that running part of it. It seems like, which is funny because I said Allen too, but I don't know. There's something there.
Yeah, I certainly think that's something to it, right?
Yeah.
And I touched on this a couple weeks ago when I was talking about the Jaden Daniels versus CJ Stroud, right? Jaden Daniels is very likable when you watch him in an interview and things like that. He's very magnetic of a personality, and that's one of the things that I thought would differentiate his market long term versus CJ Stroud's market because they were the most like to like comparison. So I think that certainly plays into Hurts, right? Because it's not an accomplishment thing, right? If we were to look back on the 2020 class and we are to value them based on accomplishment, Hurts should be the most valued quarterback of the 2020 class based on accomplishments. But that's not what we do. Right. I mean, Tua's cards are almost as expensive as Jalen Hurts cards, which is wild. And you see that what's interesting to me when we were meeting before the show and we pulled this chart up and I look at just this 1 year like movement of Hurts's prices is he actually got a little bit of movement as you would expect in the summertime national preseason hype. And all the Eagles did was show up and win. And they kept winning and they kept winning, and his prices just kept going down.
Well,
down.
It looks the opposite of what Saquon's was, right?
Right.
Saquon's at that point was going up and up, and his is going down and down.
Yeah, and if you see that peak, the top tippity top, that's last year when I paid 110% comps for his rookie Kaboom, and then if you look at the very bottom in the valley is when I end up selling it.
That's when you sold it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you see it, and the interesting thing is all of a sudden, as soon as he got to that NFC Championship game, there it goes, right?
Yeah.
Now there's the all of a sudden spike, and we've seen it again. He's been in the Super Bowl now, and all of a sudden his numbers are back up. But what's interesting is Hurts right now is still not back up to what he was in the preseason, even with a Super Bowl appearance. So let's say the Eagles win the game. What will be interesting is, can you still buy, if the Eagles win the game, could you potentially buy Hurts post winning the Super Bowl at a better price than you can buy him the rest of the year?
Definitely, if Saquon has the MVP.
Right, and a lot of that will depend on it. And Hurts did get the hype going into, as we saw in the previous chart going in. So does that rinse and repeat itself? It'll be interesting. Hurts' market has potential. I just don't think it's going to move a lot, because I think Ken probably hit the nail on the head. There is some certain factor of likability that just doesn't seem to work for Jalen Hurts, and I don't understand it. Probably never will, but I think that's a big piece of that.
Yeah. I know I hear people saying that they don't want the Chiefs or the Eagles to win. They just want Saquon to win the MVP. Right? It's like people seem to be tired of the Chiefs already. And I think with Philly being such a hard market, there's a lot of people, they either love or hate the Eagles, right? There's really no in between with them too. So it's it's going to be I think it's going to be an interesting Super Bowl, and I have some interesting predictions. So, but I want to hear what you guys have to say.
Should we touch on Mahomes, or do we want to do the?
We forgot Mahomes. Oh, go ahead.
How could you forget? You're an arrowhead behind you there.
Yeah. There he is. There's Patrick Mahomes, my boy.
Yeah. So we're looking at the same type of 1 year chart on Mahomes, and this is where I think this is the conversation that's really interesting. Mahomes over the course of a year is up 50%. And when you start to look at that, and I talked earlier about a long-term floor, this is really the conversation that I'm talking about. It's if Mahomes wins this Super Bowl and he becomes the first guy to three-peat it, and it's another Super Bowl MVP, which is, if they win the game, is going to happen, that you're going to have a point where his card prices will never go below the floor. This week might be the cheapest you ever see them, and they will just continually rise from here, just as they've done this past year as the Chiefs continue to win. And we're going to get to a point where Mahomes' prices are going to be equivalent to Brady's prices. And there's a market cap number where I think we were talking about this in a pre-show meeting, but for the audience, Brady's market cap is like $172 million, and Patrick Mahomes is already 102 on less cards. It's actually bigger per card if you look at the way Card Ladder does the market value index. So, it's an interesting concept that you could potentially buy Patrick Mahomes this week cheaper than you'll ever be able to get him again, and I think that's a real possibility and an outcome of what we're seeing. And then the other piece of it is the high population cards are definitely going to find a new floor. Mm-hmm. And we've touched on it before with like the optic red yellow, just because it's such an iconic color match rookie. And when you go through the pricing year over year, if you look at around last year at this time, that card in a PSA 10 was very consistently, a $1,700 card, an $1,800 card. Might have seen one or two sales touch 2K. They win a Super Bowl, and then it goes up a notch, and then it becomes a consistent $1,800 to $1,900 card with a few sales going over $2,000. And now we're in a world where that card is floor is a $2,000 card. We've seen sales as high as $2,500 on that card this week, and that's what that card's going to become. It's just going to become a 2K plus card for a retail parallel that you could have pulled out of a mega box in a PSA 10. And that's really what it's going to become. And then when you start to compare his larger cards, his Prism Silver, his Field Level Select Silver, the non-numbered stuff, and then compare that to like a Brady Bowman Chrome PSA 10, those are going to start to become very equivalent cards. High pop cards that are still well sought after and push into that upwards of $6,000-$7,000 range very consistently.
Yeah, because the Prism
now.
PSA 10 already did above 6K like recently, so you're seeing it. Yeah, absolutely.
And even though you mentioned like on the higher pop counts, I mean, even though they could seem high for his cards, they're certainly not high for anything 2020, 21, 22 moving forward. I mean, those pop counts are astronomical compared to what they were for 2017. So,
yeah, and also with that too, like when we talk pop counts, this and that, like you also have to think about like what's the demand for that too. Like the demand is so much higher than what the pop even is. Like the I know you probably have the exact number. Like the PSA 10s and the Optic Hollow and the Prism Silver is what, like 900 in the 900s, or is the Hollow 7?
The Hollow's 774, the Prism
Yeah.
Silver, and that's in a PSA 10.
Yep.
The Prism Silver is 967. When you get into the nines, you know, it pushes into, you know, a little over 1,000 a piece. So again, as Ken mentioned, what I'm calling a high pop card, still not high pop in relative to today's
Right.
market. And, you know, I'll touch on that red yellow again. I'm calling it a super high pop card at something around 2K. When we're comparing that in today's market, that's nothing.
Right.
So the demand, to your point, Jordan, the demand absolutely outweighs the pop count at that point. And that's why you see the prices. I mean, I just pulled it up in the last few days. The Prism Silver did 55, 5640, 5875, 5500, 6000, 5600. So that's a new floor, right? That's what we're going to see. Like that card is consistently since January 18th never done under 5K, and previously it was a big sell if it ever touched in the 5K. It was really consistently a high $4,000, $4,800 card, and now we're seeing it pop over.
And then also, and I'll probably get roasted, I don't care. You look at like when people consider like greatest of all time and things like that, you know, there's longevity versus peaks. If he wins this one, there will be no conversation about who is the greatest in a peak of of like 5 years. Like there's no one. Correct? Or am I wrong? If he wins 3 in a row and then it'd be
if
4
you're
in
basing it on
5 years.
If you're basing it on these, you know, his 5 seasons versus Brady's best 5 seasons,
it's not close.
But I think if you're doing it over the whole career, people are still going to, and you're right, you're probably going to get roasted. But if you go over the whole career, right, he still has more to go. But if you're basing it over 5, I mean, he's gone to the AFC Championship game every year, right? He's been to the Super Bowl
4 times.
Michael Jordan is the GOAT because he had the best peak ever. That's why, right? Mm-hmm. So sure, there's the longevity versus the highest peak. Also, who's not to mention that, like, I mean, Mahomes isn't done. So he's having this peak early too. Like we're calling it a peak, is it? I don't know. But what I'm saying is like where he's at right now, it's like it's never been done if he three-peats, and it like solidifies legacy to a whole new level, something that Brady did not do. And again, people are going to say Brady and Burrow are the only guys who beat him in the playoffs. He'll never beat Brady in the playoffs, sure. But like the three-peat is
bring Brady back now. I'll beat him.
He might he should just go play for the Raiders because they can't figure out a quarterback. So
they're going to end up at Joe Milton Jr. Joe Milton the third, I mean.
Maybe, but yeah, I just think this win is like it's a legacy, it's a legendary thing. And I think if he wins it, if you look at it, like especially like how, I mean, I guess not quarterbacks, but like how short NFL careers can be, like a 5-year peak. If you look at someone's best 5 years in the NFL, I don't think that's like a bad thing to look at if you really think about it. So
yeah, a win and a three-peat kind of creates that aura that's a little Jordan-esque, where it's 4 Super Bowls in 6 seasons, 6 AFC Championship games. Go to the Super Bowl 4 times, you win it 4 times, you don't lose, right? That's really the thing that people touch on, making a basketball reference with Jordan was when he got there, he didn't lose it.
Yeah.
So if you go again and you don't lose, and you happen to do that one or two more times in your career, it doesn't make a difference when those next 1 or 2 might occur. When people talk about it at the end of the day, it'll be you went 6 times and you won 6 times.
Yeah.
Versus losing that game, which is even crazier in football because the odds of you potentially losing one you shouldn't are way higher.
Yeah, so much more of a team game than basketball. Like basketball, you can have guys just will someone to a championship.
Well, it's a 7-game series, right? In basketball,
it's not just based on one game.
Yeah, it's one game volatility, right? I mean, it's like the Giants when they beat the Brady team, they could play 100 times. And
so that's a good reason too. And like if the Pats had that perfect season, that's in my opinion, that's a very similar like legacy, like mythical sort of thing, like this three-peat.
There's a reason why they didn't beat the Giants that year. I mean, it's one of those things that's just a whole added pressure. You get a team that could just go on an autopilot and win at will, right? But all of a sudden you come to this one game is going to judge everything, the undefeated season. You've won all these games in a row. You just have to win one more. That is so much pressure on a team that people, I don't want to say they crack under pressure, but I think the reason why you don't have in the NFL anyone's ever won it 3 times in a row, it's because it's a lot. It's a lot to be able to do that. And even the Chiefs making it back there for the 3rd straight time, I think that's should be amazing enough. But now we're hoping that they win the game too, right?
That's another thing too, is like there's the pressure on the Chiefs, almost like I mean, I don't know. It's like if they don't do it, it's like how much do you hold it against them? Because they've already gotten back there. There hasn't been a team that's done even that. So yeah.
And I don't think you will, right? I think you're going to see, let's say they lose the game, maybe a slight regression, and they're still.
Oh, good point. What happens if he loses? We didn't mention that, right?
Slight regression back to,
I think win or lose, you're going to see more Mahomes cards show up at card shows over the next month.
Oh, for sure.
People have been holding these cards because they don't know where the prices are. They win, they're going to come out with these more astronomical figures. And if he loses, they're going to come out and say, well, this is where he's at now. Like, if you want to buy it, here's the card to buy. And I think there's going to be a lot of people who've been sitting on these cards for a while are going to show up now in the market over this next month.
Yeah. With a loss, maybe a 10% pullback. With a win, sky's the limit.
Yeah. Okay, so we got to get into our predictions. What do you think?
Who wants to go first?
Go ahead, Jordan.
I have it written down here. I have the Chiefs 31, the Eagles 27.
Tyler?
Chiefs 27-17.
I have it a lower scoring game than the two of you. And I want to say this. I want to point this out. The Friday before the Super Bowl, when they played the Eagles the last time, I was on a podcast with 2 other people, and of course they were all on the Eagles side. And I said to them, I feel that the Eagles are the better team, and I don't know if the Chiefs have enough to win that game. And the Chiefs came back and they surprised me and won that game. I almost feel that going into this Super Bowl, that I feel that they have a lot of added pressure on them to win the game, where I don't know if the Eagles have as much pressure on them to go in and win, although they want to win, right? And they have a lot of tools to win. But I have it a very low scoring game. I have it 23-19.
Okay. The over-under is 49.5, with the Chiefs having a 1.5 spread. So I think in theory that'd be what 27-26 is what the
Yeah.
odds makers think. But yeah, okay. So
I'm on the under at 23-19.
so if it's a shootout, I get free golf. If it's a nail biter, or if it's a lower scoring game, it's between one
it's
of
a
you.
lot. I think a bunch of field goals are happening both ways for both teams.
Yeah, so you're at 42 combined. I'm at 44 combined. Yeah, so Ken, you and I are on the same page on this. I just think
I'm at
there's a little bit of defense.
Yeah, I'm at 58.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, Jordan, let's jump into some listener questions. We went 10 minutes over on the
Hey, it happens. So let's go from let's go
while you're looking that up, I just want to throw one little trivia question, something we never even talked about.
Okay.
The highest paid running back to win a Super Bowl.
The highest pay, are we talking for the salary cap, like percentage wise, or
what their salary was of the winning running back in the Super Bowl for the Super Bowl team?
Oh God. It's probably not a lot. That's for sure.
No, it's historically the running backs are the lowest paid guys going in.
Jamal Lewis.
$3.5 million a year.
No, 2.4.
Oh, wow.
And it was a Patriot.
LeGarrette?
Nope.
Kevin Falk?
Nope.
Sony Michel?
Corey Dillon.
Keep going. There's got to be more, right?
Who the hell else would it have been?
Oh my God! Patriots fans are yelling right now at the listening to this. James White?
No.
Oh my Lord!
What's it?
Man, I'm surprised Jamal Lewis didn't make more money than this. Whoever this is.
Give us the name. I have no idea. Who is it?
I just want to make sure I'm right.
I've got 10 questions.
Let's say it was Damian Harris. Isn't it?
Oh my God.
Damian Harris.
Really?
Wow. Yeah. Well, okay.
I know. I was just listening to on the radio today, and they were just talking about it was Damian Harris, and they were just talking about how the Super Bowl running backs are so always very low paid, to win a Super Bowl. So if this happens this year, if it goes the other way.
Well, is Pacheco on a rookie deal?
Yeah.
So he probably didn't have a lot of money. And then I'm assuming Kareem Hunt didn't sign something more than that. So
no.
Yeah.
Man, Marshawn Lynch didn't make more money than that?
Either? Yeah. That's surprising too.
That's surprising. That's crazy.
Wow.
All right. Listener question. Let's roll.
All right. So I got in, someone messaged me. So from an anonymous listener, is it worth it to re-slab old slabs? Like the old PSA slabs, do you think they would maintain value over a newer one? Same thing with SGC.
Who wants to start? Tyler? What do you think?
So I think in some cases, yes. So when you're in the vintage game, in the SGC world specifically, the new label will add more value than an old label. And I think the reason for that is the old label often provides some layer of confusion to when somebody's looking at the slab itself. And also I think SGC just when they think about it being under that old label, they didn't have the market credibility that they do today, putting the new label on there. Because if for those who don't know, an old SGC label will have a grade like an SGC 3, for example, but it'll have another grade of a number. And that number can actually vary inside the grade. Like, a 3 could be like 31 or 37. And then you have to really kind of look at and understand that, which creates some real confusion. So I think, in the vintage game, absolutely new label versus old label, especially in the SGC world. there is a case to go ahead and get it relabeled, especially for what it costs from an SGC perspective, to just have it moved over. In a PSA, maybe, I think there's.
Now,
you see it in the Jordan rookie, like people pay more for a new label versus an old label.
Isn't the qualifiers too? Like there's like the miscut and OC and stuff like that. If you go to SGC, does that get removed from the label?
Yeah, they SGC typically won't put the qualifier on there like some older label PSA labels will. The qualifier can still actually be there on a new PSA label. It's certainly possible. But there is a certain market difference even on the PSA label, old label versus new label. The only thing I think you run the risk of, like, if you send it in to get it relabeled, will they actually relabel it to the same grade?
Yeah, I think the new label, a big reason it's going to bring a premium is because, as what you also said, it also represents the newest and most up-to-date grading standards within that, what's encapsulated. So I know when I've been selling a card, this is the experience that I've had. It's only an issue when you go to sell it and someone wants to try to get a deal for the card because it's quote unquote in the old, that's a sick card, but it's in the old label. Like that. That's when it comes up for me, at least, is when it comes to the transaction. Like, but yeah, I also think it's a real thing about the changing in grading standards. Like, you send an old 10, like PSA, won't they like give you the difference in money if it gets brought down?
I'm not for sure on that.
I'm pretty sure, like, if there's a value adjustment, because it's by their word that this is what it's a 10, but when they crack it out, if it's then a 9, I'm pretty sure that value adjustment you get compensated for it, because technically it's their change in standards, it's their issue.
So when you ask them to reslab, they regrade that card? Is that what you're saying?
It's not just it's not just an automatic reslab. That happens all the time, or not all the time, but it happens.
Yeah.
So if you had a slab that had a crack on it and you say, I just want to get this in a fresh slab, and you sent it in, they're going to regrade that card.
Well, especially with a crack, because they're going to look to see if it caused damage to the card. So especially in a crack. I'm just saying, if you have a perfectly good slab and it gets sent in to get reslabbed, I think I'm like very sure it would be regraded. Like, yeah. Oh. I could be wrong, but like I've heard horror stories of people sending in in some of the bigger Facebook groups. I've read like, I sent in this, and then all of a sudden now it's a 9 instead of like a 10, and it was like, that happens. So yeah, I'd say be wary of it. It's there's risk reward to everything. So yeah, but
and some of it's aesthetics, right? Like you all know that I have a couple unique collection pieces, and one is my brother and I are currently working on. It's my brother working on it, and I'm just kind of helping out, is the 1986 Fleer PSA 8 set for basketball. And, his preference is to have them all new labels, and so he may trade out an old label 8 for sell it and just buy a new label 8 if the opportunity presents itself.
You'll be the guy that comes back a 9.
Oh yeah. My brother, if that happened to my brother loses his mind. He's going to listen to this. He's going to laugh. But yeah, he'd lose his mind.
Dang it! I got a 9.
Yes.
All right. Awesome. All right. Let's get to the next question from Matt Ryan. From the standpoint of a collector, as I mostly am, why do we see collectors pick up a large amount of random cards of a particular player every week, month, rather than being more patient and strategic surrounding a card they really want? Of course, everyone can participate in the hobby however they choose. I'm just curious on the thought process that goes into this behavior. Ken, I think you're the perfect guy to answer that.
I just talked about
I know, that's so funny. I was like, Ken, that's you.
Yeah, and it was almost an aha moment.
Somewhere?
it's almost an aha moment when I look around and I think to myself, what is the mentality? Why is the mentality that I need to, instead of going out and buying a $2,000 card of the player or yeah, I'm just making that number up. Why do I continuously buy the $100 to $200 cards, all in PSA 10s, like as many as I can get? Just keep it going, and then at the end of the day, I'm thinking to myself, and you know what? I said something to my wife, and this is kind of how this whole thing started, where she was asking about some cards, and I said, "Well, I have like 10 of these." I said, "They're all like $100 cards." I said, "So that's like $1,000." She goes, "Well, why do you have 10 of them? Like, why wouldn't you just have one nice $1,000 card? Why do you have 10 $100 cards?" And I really couldn't answer that question. I really, because it just seems to me in my mind, it makes more sense because it's less risk, right? I'm buying all these cards and it's less risk and it may be less reward. Sometimes it's more reward. Sometimes it pops up. Sometimes it goes down. But I think in my mind, it's like less risk, and it's something I talked about on Monday's episode or Sunday's episode, and I said I'm going to change that. Instead of buying 10 $100 cards of a player, I'm going to buy $1,000 card or $1,500 card, and that's kind of more my mentality. Not saying I'm never going to buy the $100 cards, but I don't need 30 or 40 $100 cards, right? Maybe I only need 10, 12, or 15, and then the rest invest into something more. But I think it becomes, to answer his question, I think it becomes affordability, right? I think it's easier. It's like, you're able to buy one here for 100, and then buy one there for 100, and then next week buy one there for 100, and you end up buying 10 of them, and you spend $1,000, but you didn't have to put all $1,000 out at on one single card. So I think it becomes the affordability, and I think a lot of people in the hobby are like that. Tyler, Zip, I know you set up at shows too, but you see people will come in and they'll say, I PC this person, and they'll start buying every card of that person.
Yep.
Like if they'll go through the singles boxes and they'll pull out every single card of that person. Now those may be only $1 or $2 cards, but they're in the box, and now they're saying, this is who I PC and I want all those cards. Right. So it's very minimal investment that they're putting in there. And I'll say to them sometimes, oh, you PC that person? Look, I got this great. And they'll be like, no, that's, this is my lane over here. I'm staying away from those $500 or $700 cards. Like I'm happy with the $1, $2, and $5 cards. And again, I think it becomes affordability.
And also too, some people like just the abundance, the hoarding, the amount, like that's like, I think that's part of it too. Like the affordability, sure, but it's like, wow, look at all of this that I got. Look at all of it. This is how much I love this player. Like, because he said from a collector, so I'm not even going to talk about it as like
selling it,
an investment. Like I'm like, as a collector of like let's talk about this, the psychology of it. I have all of this. Look at this vast collection I have. Look, I can lay it out on the table, take a big picture of all these cards, and it's the amount. It's big. It's this. It's grandiose. This is what we have, right? Rather than, here's my superfractor, 1 of 1, that is 10 times the amount of this table, which I mean is also affordability, but it's also like the amount, I think, matters. I think people like to have that big hoarding collection.
I think you see the opposite ends of the spectrum, right? Depending on the collector, there's the collector who wants the big grandiose collection, and there's the collector who wants, a very hyper specific thing, and that's what they go after, right? I'll use myself as an example from a collector perspective. Really, my true love, most favorite PC that I have is to build a complete roster of the back-to-back big red machine World Series winning teams, and I want one card of every player, ideally their rookie card, in the highest grade I can get my hands on. So it's one single card of every player, highest grade, preferably a rookie card. So it's a different way of thinking about collecting, or it's collecting a rainbow of an autograph of a parallel or something like that. that happens. So I think you just get these. You kind of fall into one camp or the other. You're either in that camp that has the $100 cards, or you're in the camp who wants one hyper specific, really awesome card, and they love to look at that card. And
or
so,
you get the guy with deep pockets who has a huge collection of a bunch of high-end stuff.
Yeah, of course.
So I think it's a full spectrum of it, kind of like you said too, from someone who's hyper fixated to someone who likes the, having a bunch, and you could almost like chart it, like if you're looking at like quantity and then like a quantity quality sort of thing. So yeah, I think it's really just preference, I think, is what it comes down to.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. From Tom G. How do each of you deal with the quote unquote off-season dip in any sport? Do you stash inventory that you can no longer sell profitably? Do you take the opportunity to buy items for the next season, especially items to grade? How long after a season ends do you modify your strategy? Ken, go for it. I know you've talked about this before, and you've had a system for years. So
yeah, I mean, most people know my system. I like to buy I like to buy ahead of the season. So I like to be 6 months ahead of everything I do. And if Panini could have kept up with when they were dropping cards, it would have worked out much better than all these delays in dropping, new products. But, so spring and summer, I was buying women's basketball, to sell this time of year, January, February, March, the college stuff. In the, the fall, I'm trying to rip as much stuff and get it to grading, to be first to market with it, to try to do it the best I can on it. But I just think you have to be ahead of the market. So what he refers to as the dip, I think he said dip, I refer to as the dead zone, right? You're going into it right now. We're about to get into a dead zone of football. So we're going to hit the Super Bowl. We're going to have a couple of weeks of hype with cards. And even though the Super Bowl is 12 months, the football is 12 months a year, right? The buying opportunities that start at the end of February into March are fantastic with football, of card stuff here I'm going to hold on to, right? And then break out in June and July. And that's when I'm going to sell it. So for someone like me and doing this, I just stay 3 to 6 months ahead all the time. That is my plan. What about you guys?
how about you, Tyler? What do you think?
I would say for me, it's probably I don't know if the dip is that impactful, other than I guess I would preface it first. This is really my only second cycle through it, and the first time through it last year, I only knew what I knew. But going into this year, from a strategy perspective, it's just an opportunity to buy, and I'll take a little of Ken's approach of buying up everybody that I think has the ability to move up as we move in deeper into the summer and get to the football hype. Like I got a list of about probably 5 or 6 players who I will buy that aren't Patrick Mahomes. Otherwise, to be honest with you, I don't hold a lot of cards long enough that it matters. Like, and I'll buy anything, right? Like, you could sell me a Yu-Gi-Oh graded card, and I would probably buy it if I knew I could make 25% on it. As long as I knew where I could sell it. The one slight difference to that for me is back to, when we were talking about Culture Collision last week, and I touched on those really rare or low pop type of items that give you stability in your inventory. That stuff I will buy and hold. That's a slightly different strategy. So it really it comes to the sport or the player I'm buying more so, and how that strategy is, rather than the season. To me, right? The perfect example I would say is Brock Purdy is somebody I will buy in the dip, and I will try to sell going into the season. Patrick Mahomes is somebody I'm going to buy and just hold on to and sell for it when somebody gives me the number, because that's the card they want. Same thing with the Michael Jordans, the LeBrons, the Kobes, those type of things. You know, and then we'll see it, and really we'll see it probably the even more microcosm of it than the NFL is NBA playoffs.
Oh,
I don't think there is a more volatile thing than NBA
to the moon.
Yeah, I mean, literally overnight, and we won't get into this podcast. I can get into a crazy story about what happened in the Stanford show last year. Really was my introduction to this, but it is a wild experience, and I will have a very unique strategy going into the NBA playoffs that probably starts as soon as the All-Star break is over, and we can touch on that at another time because that's another conversation. But
yeah, I think we're lucky this year too with football that we have such a great rookie class, and you know, last year it was C.J. Stroud, right, and a little bit of Will Levis and little bit of, you know, other, but at the end of the day, it was really mostly everybody just chasing Stroud. But this year we've got a handful of really good quarterbacks, you know, that I think what's going to happen, and we all know that once you get to May and June, people get it stuck in their mind who they're after, you know, and that starts to make the market jump up. And as we head into the national, there's always that one or two that people are chasing by the time you get there. But I have a feeling this year there's going to be 4 or 5 people are chasing. I think it's going to be, you know, a little bit more spread out and not so honed in on one quarterback this year. So in the last few years, you know, I would buy the Burrows and the Herberts and the, you know, and put those aside. The Jordan Love, right? Put all those aside and hold them. This year, I don't think I have to do that. This year, I think I could just do this prospecting on these 4 or 5 quarterbacks that were in this class, and I think I'll do just as well with that, you know, prospecting and then moving them all before the football season starts.
Yeah, and then the last thing I'll say, because like Tyler, I move things like very quickly too. So in order for me to like double up on like what could be perceived as a dip or a little lull in the market, I do it every year for baseball, and then I end up trying to do it in the summer for football. I'll just send out a big bulk order so that acts as my holding period, and then I'll get this. So like I'll get the improvement on the grade value, and then the market value improvement. So it's like you're doubling up on the grade and like my patience doesn't matter because it's out of my hands. So that's what I've done. Like I have like a 50 card order of Skeens graded cards about to go on PC Sports Cards like within the next week that I bought in December, and I'm going to do very, very well on them. So it's just like that's the way I look at it, because I know myself. But you also have to know yourself if you're comfortable holding and you want to hold, because if you're going to hold for a certain percentage of, like, you should think like, what is, if you want to hold a card, what is it that you want to sell it at? And is that time frame of months worth the amount of little profits that you can make up in the time? Because if it's like $50 over 5 months, I'm sure with that money you could make way more money than $50 over 5 months. Like, just keep that in mind.
Yeah, the one last thing I would add to that is I really think that this football offseason, when you're talking about the dip, will be very unique. Because to Ken's point, you've got 5 first-round rookies that are all going to be relevant after 1 year, which is really rare. So if you like a veteran, this may be the offseason for you, because you're going to be able to buy those veterans, I think, way under the radar at bottom pricing, because there's going to be a concentration into those 5 first-round picks. And then you might see by national that the buying pool might be 10 or 12 quarterbacks wide, which will be nuts. But you could see that, maybe even more.
Yeah.
Like half the league could be viable.
Yeah. And you know, we sit at shows, we go to shows, and we know what's going on. We're always looking cards up. And if we see a player like you know, Hurts or you know, Brock Purdy or whoever, if you start seeing that decline, and it gets to a point where you're like, there's no reason why it should be this low, and it's just this low because people are bailing on those cards to get into something else, right? Then you say to yourself, it's worth taking a shot. These cards are at below the floor right now. It's worth taking a shot on a handful of these cards and then throwing them aside for a couple months or a few months, 3 months, 4 months, and then seeing where they go, because they're always going to come back up. And if you're, I learned doing this year after year, I say, oh, maybe I should move these cards now. And then I always say, I should have never moved them, because now look where the price is now. And so you learn at that. You learn to, call it strong hands. You learn to just take those things and put them aside and try to forget about them. I like to lock them away or put them in a box so I don't have to see them, because if I see them, I'm tempted. I'll start calculating what they're worth and maybe move them too soon.
Out of sight, out of mind. Absolutely. Yep. Next question we have is a two-part kind of one that we talked a little bit about before, about the new slab, old slab. So I'm not going to ask his grading question. He asked a few questions. One that I think is a really good question. How do you deal with a rare card, like a 1/1, that has a recent comp, but it's your comp? When you try to sell it, how do you explain to the buyer that the comp is not relevant because it is a 1/1? I'd like to start out with this and say, I think the comp is relevant. And I think in this specific situation, being transparent that's your purchase. And the only way for them to get that card is to pay your number, or, a number that you guys agree to, is also important, because if they really want that card, there's nowhere else they can get it. Comps when it comes to a 1/1 are loosely a ballpark, I would say, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, a 1/1 card, there's only one of them. So,
right. Yeah.
So it's only worth what you want to sell it for, and it's only worth what somebody else wants to pay for it.
Yeah. I think, and that's that, right? Like, I think, but to say the comp of your purchase isn't relevant, I don't think is true. You could, it's relevant even if you say, "Oh, I got a steal." You could still,
or I bought it at the right time before you wanted it, or
right?
Before
exactly.
You bought it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. The only advice I would have on dealing with 1/1s: buy them privately, sell them publicly.
Agreed. Because then you don't have to deal with that problem. Absolutely.
Don't sell a 1/1 privately, a 1/1 privately, and don't buy it publicly.
And if you do sell it publicly on auction, it may be your best case scenario, even with fees, when you get a bidding war.
100%.
Yep. Alrighty. Next question from Devin Elliott. Which strategy do you think is more profitable over time? Is it the quick flips of hot players and making a little bit of money on each card? Or is it buying the players who have dipped in value but believe holding them over time that their market will bounce back? I think we kind of touched on this a bit. I think it depends on the volume and what you're doing. Like, if you're gonna buy like ultra high end cards to hold, then that maybe could be more valuable. You could maybe make more money doing that than a bunch of quick flips, right? But if it's going to be,
it really
like,
depends how long you're holding it for too.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things there, but I would say for me, in my personal experiences only, it's the quick flips that have been more profitable, just because you can reinvest that money so quick and keep using it. Yeah, for me at least.
I can honestly say over the last few years, I've been buying and putting and stashing away for a few months and selling, probably only doing 10 to 20%. There's no great, I haven't had any great, jumps in value, no 50% or, no big. I think the highest value I've gotten on cards were more faster flips, buying something and selling it pretty quick, or within a few weeks or a month. So I think, it's like playing the stock market. Like, you buy a stock, right? And you have to give it time to mature. And I think that's the same thing when you're buying a card long-term for 6 months or 8 months to hold. But I think there's probably more profit to be made in quicker flips, buying a card and moving it quick, and even grading a card and getting it fast to market. And
I guess then you can say how quick is a quick flip too, right? Because then you can go down that argument for sure. What do you think, Tyler? I think I know your answer, but what do you think, Tyler?
I would say the quick flip is right. If you can do enough volume, that's maximum profitability. It just kind of comes out to a math game. The caveat that I would say with that is, if you're going to play that long-term hold game, do it with larger value cards. So make it up. There's use Brock Purdy as an example. You buy a Brock Purdy rookie auto today for, let's say, just hypothetically $600 that once was a $2,000 card this time last year. You have the ability to make a large profit margin on that, because it doesn't have to get all the way back to 2000, but eventually it'll push it, unless he just disappears, it'll push its way back somewhere in the middle. And if you're going to play the long-term game, do it with low pop, rare comp cards, because all you need at that point is one comp, and you don't have to worry about it changing once you get that right one comp. But you have to, those cards that you do decide to hold and do that with, you've got to be pretty vigilant on understanding when you get that comp that you go use. That's how you play that game, in my opinion. And I think I think the real answer is you do a combination of both. If I was to, break down my portfolio of that, it's probably 80% of the quick flips and 20% of doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. We got two more questions.
I think on that one, wants us to expand on the economics of doing card shows. I think we might save that one for next time, because I think that's going to take a longer time to address.
I would agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
This next question I really like, and I think it's actually a great question. It's from Cyrus. With young collectors coming into the hobby, do you guys see vintage holding value? Example, Ruth, Mantle, Ted Williams, etc. Since young collectors have no attachment to these players, what does that mean for the market in the near future? And then this is the part of the question that I really like, and I think, Tyler, you'll like it too. Will Curry, Ohtani, Mahomes be the new quote unquote vintage in 30 plus years? My quick take on the second part of that is that in 30 years, the 90s inserts will be the new vintage. And I wanted to say that before Tyler could say that. But like, that's what I think. And then the Curry, Ohtani, Mahomes will then start to trickle into that category if careers stay up and there's no controversy and all of that. Before that, with vintage holding value, I think it will hold value, and I think it will probably steadily continue to rise, because I think it changes from some people who have connections to this to then historical significance. I think it starts to turn into like a history thing, and the way data is tracked, and to understand what those cards mean from those sets. And there's not a bazillion parallels. There's the card. I think we'll all continue to maintain value. I definitely don't think the three guys named Ruth, Mantle, and Ted Williams are going to fall out like the bottom. Like, I think there's pretty much a hard floor, and that's not going down like ever. And just my opinion.
I've seen a lot of younger generation collectors a lot recently that are collecting vintage or buying vintage, and just know so much. I've done deep dive into vintage, and they don't have any connection to it. Obviously, they're much younger than I am. And I think you're going to see, and a lot of them are saying, and you'll hear people say all the time, well, vintage is great because they're not going to tear an ACL. They're not going to, get injured or this or that. Their value is almost a steady rise versus it being in a volatile market. So I think you're going to see, in my opinion, I think you're going to see as many vintage collectors in the near future as there are ultra modern collectors out there.
This question is probably reading my mind, because I think I've had this conversation with Jordan on several occasions.
Absolutely. I love the question. Love the question.
I think it's probably a little bit of a lot of different things. And so here's what I'll say. The iconic cards from vintage cards, your Mantles, your Jackie Robinsons, Satchel Paige, Willie Mays, those cards, and especially the iconic cards of those guys, absolutely will never lose value in my opinion. And I'd have to be hard convinced otherwise. Where I think vintage could see a loss of anything would be at some point the guys that are vintage set collectors today won't exist. They're not going. The new vintage will not be today's 50s 60s baseball that are collecting those sets, and that's why it'll be the iconic cards that maintain that long-term value. What I think you will see is, I think Jordan's spot on. I think 90s inserts basketball and 90s early 2000s refractors will become the new version of vintage. What I think you will see in that space is today those inserts and refractors, outside of a few insert sets, all of the value is in 3 players: Kobe, LeBron, and Michael Jordan. What I think you will start to see over time as folks that are in their late 30s, such as myself, are in their 40s today, as they start to have more buying power in the market and can just honestly go buy what the hell they want.
Tim Duncan.
Guys like you will start to see those other players gain traction, in my opinion, in those type of cards, because I think you will see more people gravitate towards building the Duncan Go Nuts set or the Planet Metal set or whatever it might be, those insert sets, and that will become the new vintage, which will make the non-Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James cards of all of these sets go up in value, and they will become the new fringe vintage players today, because there's a lot of guys in that space that are arguably all-time greats. I mean, Tim Duncan is somebody that is in that space who doesn't get any mention from a hobby perspective. And if anybody was to start their all-time starting 5 in the NBA today, he would be on the roster. He would be in the starting 5. He's the greatest power forward to ever play the game.
Yeah, and then you got Hakeem, you got Shaq. There's a bunch of all-time guys that, like, you start looking at that rare stuff, and I think eventually, right? Yeah. Eventually it will matter.
And so to me, that's going to be the new vintage, and that's where you will see that stuff explode at some point. That'll really, and that's where I think the vintage piece will lose some of its luster, just because the guys building the 56 top set, which is absolutely stunningly beautiful, just won't be out there to build it, right? Because to be honest with you, there's not enough guys who are 37 years old like I am who want to build a 56 top set. All those guys building that set are probably in their 50s or older, and at some point that just phases out, and it's going to be what is people in their late 20s today through mid 40s today, what attracts them to the hobby. And I think those refractors, those 90s inserts, that's going to be part of that. And then obviously some of the rare cards that are just hard to grade, like the Curry rookie and things like that. So I think it's a great question. I think that's really where you'll see a market shift eventually. And then as you move on in time, right, the Ohtanis and the Patrick Mahomes will become part of that. But I mean, they're probably not vintage in 25 years, because those guys are going to play another 10.
Yeah, because those guys will be looking like the 90s right now.
Yeah, that's kind of what, you're a long ways out for them, but really it's those guys that are in the mid-late 90s, early 2000s today, that I think will probably become that new space. And unfortunately, it can't be baseball, because it's just a junk wax era. Football will be an interesting market there. You're already seeing 90s football inserts gain a little traction.
See, that I was going to ask that. I mean, you've been really heavy on the baseball and the basketball, but do you see the 2000 to 2012 or 2015? Do you see any of that football gaining?
The football stuff, I think there is some attraction there, because people do like to collect Barry Sanders and guys like, Peyton Manning were in the 90s, so got some of those cool inserts and stuff that kind of went away in the early 2000s that like Brady never got, which is actually so weird that they're a couple years apart, but they don't cross those worlds.
I got you here too. I think for that time period, you go to the GOATs of that time period, and now I think the quarterback GOATs are like Brady, Mahomes type, right? So like you go back then, and it's going to be Jerry Rice, Randy Moss, Barry Sanders. I think those are the guys from that time period. And is that, you agree with that or no? Because I think those are the guys with the special refractors and stuff that's really going to matter.
Yeah. I would certainly like, from a football perspective, at some point, I think some of that gets traction. There's the Mosses, and really Rice is almost too far back. It's really going to be those guys who probably played into the late 90s, the Randy Moss, Barry Sanders, iconic guys. I think the Mannings of the world. What'll be interesting is guys like that, like Brady and Manning, and like even like Drew Brees from a quarterback perspective. Early game use stuff and auto stuff might start to become a little vintage-esque, because that's stuff that's actually kind of still weirdly cheap, is like early 2000s where everything was actually game used from like memorabilia stuff. The basketball kind of gets its special spot there with the exquisite stuff, mainly because of LeBron just happened to be a rookie in the right year for that. But that's an interesting space too. So I think that is the stuff that will become the new vintage, and then it'll just be cyclical, right? But going back to it, the iconic cards will never go away. Somebody's always going to appreciate a 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle, a 1956 Jackie Robinson, pick a card, 54 Willie Mays, Hank Aaron. Yeah. They're always going to be appreciated.
Awesome.
Good. So I think we're way over this time, but it was a great episode. I think we covered a lot of stuff here.
Absolutely. Yeah. What are you gonna do? You got good questions. You got to answer them. So
yeah. Fun stuff to talk about for sure.
Absolutely. So keep the questions coming, please. Facebook, right? Hobby Shop podcast
Facebook group. Yep.
And if you're not on Facebook, Zip at Zips Cards, send them a message, or me at sportscard_lessons, and we'll make sure your questions make it in here.
And then also, if you go to my Instagram at zips.cards, I have highlights on my profile where you can follow a link to our Facebook group to go join, or hit the QR code, and then the QR code brings to the YouTube.
Yep.
Right. YouTube. Yeah. So there's two separate highlights, one with a Facebook link and one with a QR code to bring you to the YouTube page. So yeah.
Great. All right, fellas, it's been fun. Hopefully next week we'll be talking about how you guys are treating me to golf. But enjoy the Super Bowl weekend. We didn't touch on that. Any shows this weekend? Tyler, you doing any shows?
I won't do any. Probably go walk Orange the morning before the Super Bowl.
That's Sunday, right?
I think it's Sunday morning.
Yeah. Zip, you got anything going?
No shows for me this weekend.
No. All right. Yeah, Tyler, I think I'm probably with you. I think because I don't think there's a Saturday local show this weekend.
Yeah, not off the top of my head.
Yeah. So, all right. Great episode, fellas. We will see you next week. We still didn't have an outro. You got to do something. Got to say something. Anything? Anybody?
Just have fun, right? Enjoy it. Have fun. We talk about a lot of stuff, but at the end of the day, just have fun.
Yeah. All right, guys. We'll see you next week.
Thanks. All right. Bye-bye.